We also have some additional attendees today, so I'd like to, Mr. Chair, it probably makes sense for us to go around so those folks that came in can be introduced.
Yep.
In the room here with us, we have Mr. Silva.
Yeah, my name is Paul Silva from Reading, Massachusetts, and I drafted a letter working with the town on entrance fees that I believe is on the agenda for today.
And I see some other folks here. I can't see names on the screen, so if anyone who's here attending would like to introduce themselves.
I can introduce, I'm with a group here with the town of Reading as well. My name is Matt Cornelis. I'm the town manager in Reading. I'm here with Chris Cole, our DPW director, Sharon Angstrom, who's our CFO, and Jane Wellman, who's our assistant town manager. And I believe there may be a few select board members on the call as well. I saw some names, so.
Anyone else who'd like to introduce themselves?
Yes, I'm Melissa Murphy. I'm a select board member from Reading.
Welcome.
And
All right. Sorry.
sorry, I'm Chris Haley. I'm also select board member in Reading. Thank you.
Sure thing.
Great.
Hi,
They might be called, and they also might be called in. I'm not sure. Mr. Smith, I see you're trying to introduce yourself as well, it looks like.
oh yes, hi. My name is Michael Smith. I am the Deputy Chief of Staff and Communications Director for House Minority Leader Brad Jones. And he's unable to attend the meeting today, but he asked if I could sit in and actually express briefly his support for Mr. Silva's letter that was sent to Executive Director Lasky last month in regards to the Reading and the entrance fees.
Welcome. Thank you. And for folks who may not have seen the emails that I sent over, I did receive emails from select board members and from Mr. Smith as well that I did send over ahead of time, indicating they were coming and their position on the issue that's being discussed. So Mr. Chair, I think you want to take this out of order?
Yeah. So just a point of order on the agenda. The letter was in everyone's packet, and it was our intention to take this up under other business, which is typically our last item. But since we've got a large number of guests, we won't have you all sit through all of that. So we'll take other business out of order and take this up right now.
Sounds great. So again, just as a quick way of background, as Mr. Rasha just indicated, I shared a piece of correspondence that Mr. Silva sent to the MWRA. They asked me to bring it to you all, and it in essence objects to the recent, defer to the letter. I'm assuming you all read it, so I can save everyone a little bit of time. But just to kind of give a background on this information, part of the information I put in your packet relates to the discussion and the materials that we put together as we went through the entrance fee waiver debate and discussion at the executive committee and the advisory board level. It basically took many months to get through, and there were a lot of pieces of information that were requested by both the executive committee and the advisory board, numbers that needed to be run to make sure that the communities felt like it made sense to do. And the MWRA also was instructed to reach to outside counsel, their bond counsel, to address specifically this issue of the entrance fee. If we were to waive the entrance fee, would we be legally required or obligated to refund the entrance fees? And that determination came back that it was not. And included also in that meeting packet for you all was the letter that went to from the advisory board to the MWRA. That includes a link to all those materials. If you want to take a walk down memory lane in the 37-page packet or whatever, you're welcome to do so. But basically, it seems pretty clear that the advisory board at that time, 2022 or so, I think, recommended this to the MWRA board, knowing and discussing the impacts on the communities. Again, as noted in the letter, there were some communities opposed. Stoughton and Saugus opposed the waiver, and Walpole abstained. And then, given that this has been addressed to both the MWRA as well as some of the elected officials we see here today, MWRA really felt it was important for us to weigh in on this before kind of responding or taking it up under their own. This recommendation did come from us to them, and they then followed through with it at the board meeting. So that's kind of where I'm going to leave it, Mr. Chair, because we didn't have a specific recommendation. It's going to be just for discussion and figuring out how the executive committee wanted to handle this.
Great, thank you. So we do have the advisory board representative from Reading here. obviously with, his appointing authority. So if, the Reading delegate would like to, provide some context for us, that'd be appreciated.
So I believe Chris Cole, the DPW director, is our official delegate, but I mean, I could speak on behalf of the town. You've read Paul Silva's letter. We fully stand behind it as a town. We think this whole entry fee, I'd say controversy for us, is something we would like to get settled. I know you said legally you don't have to refund entry fees. We'd have to look at that, but we're saying this is the right thing to do. Reading is paid much more than anybody else to come into the MWRA. I know it was done years ago, but if you look at the numbers and you look at Mr. Silver's letter on the last page, when he discusses what other towns have paid, Reading is paying most of the entry fee for the MWRA, close to like $11 million. We don't know why that happened, why it was. Some of this predates us. I think it was done in the early 2000s, but it doesn't seem to make sense. It seems to be the right thing to do, especially now when you're letting people in for basically nothing. The original people came in, the original towns came in for nothing, and we're in a group of 6 or 7 towns that had to pay, and we've paid the lion's share of it. So we fully stand by this. This is something that's been discussed in our town for years and years. I thank Mr. Silva for putting it in a succinct letter and putting it to you. So it's not something we want to give up on right now just because there may be some legal opinion out there. This is an issue of fundamental fairness for us. We really feel that we weren't treated fairly, especially given the decision in 2002 that these fees will then be waived. This affects everything. It affects our rates. We have, I think, the 3rd highest water bills in the state. So this has become a big issue in Reading, and that's why you have, the team here that we have today, including elected officials and the state representative's office. So I would urge you to reconsider if you could, and if you have the authority to do that. It's pretty clear on its face that Reading is sort of being overcharged here, and we would really, want to have that revisited and hopefully get a refund of some, if not all, of the entrance fee that we paid on this. And if you would allow other comments, we have the full group here. I mean, I think everybody feels the same way, but speaking on behalf of the town, that's our opinion, and we fully stand behind Mr. Silva on this. He's done us a great service by putting this together. Anybody in the room here want to say any more, or any? Okay.
So
Okay.
Real quick. Great. I don't see any other comments
Okay.
from the representatives room there, or delegates room there, so.
For the purpose of the minutes, I see Mr. Sullivan's on, so
you.
Boston is present.
Thank you. Sorry, Mr. Daniels, it looked like you had a question?
has all the entrance fee been paid, or is it being paid over time and being amortized?
The communities that were still paying the entrance fee were the ones that was at the heart of the discussion whenever we were discussing this waiver. So it was amortized over time. Most communities chose to take that option because that was something that we modified the entrance fee years ago to do. And also just for the purposes of context, to remind folks, the entrance fee, it's a horrible name, because what it really is taking a look back at all the capital costs that all the existing MWRA communities paid in, rebuilding the water treatment plant, redoing the entire water system. They go back, they assess what those costs were, and then they depreciate it using a formula to do so. We do actually have a video on our website that actually walks through that and kind of explains it, because that was a little confusing to folks way back in the day. So the charges for any communities joining are really just to make sure that somebody doesn't join later and then you all paid for all the infrastructure that they now get to benefit from. But again, not making them pay anything that is, necessarily the full cost of what it was back then, or making sure it's kind of amortized and depreciated correctly.
Yeah,
So,
yeah, and that was as I recall, a big portion of the debate. as Mr. Romero pointed out, this was the topic of discussion at the executive committee for a
long time.
protracted time.
Yeah.
There was more discussion on this than any other item. And to my knowledge, it was the only item that had been discharged without a unanimous vote.
In a long
Because,
time, yeah.
because there were some strong positions against eliminating the entrance fee for new communities. And really the driving force for a number of people who were in favor of it was looking forward, that, we, the MWRA, the Quabbin, has an excess commodity to sell. There are additional customers who could benefit from that, and once they're in and paying annual water rates, that then has a financial benefit to the member communities.
Existing member. communities.
Existing member communities. So that was sort of the compelling argument for the people who were in favor of it, but there was a lot of math involved. And there had been discussion about the fairness of the recently admitted ones who had paid the entrance fee. And discussion, around keeping that, one with the legal decision that, it was something that had already been paid under existing regulations, and how a look back and forgiveness of that would be difficult legally, but also just where we were, as Matt points out, that the repayment of the sunk costs from the previous member communities that were still paying off their debt. So none of this was taken lightly at the time. So that's just sort of my recollection. I don't know if anybody else who had been part of that debate wants to speak up. It looks like Mr. Renugian.
Mr. Renugian?
Thank you. Yes, my recollection is very similar. We had a robust discussion on it back and forth. Not any consensus to start, a lot of compromise to get to where we did. And as Rich mentioned, it wasn't unanimous. I don't recall Reading bringing up these comments at the time, but I may just not remember correctly. So I just wanted to reiterate Rich's point that there was a robust, deliberate process that we already went through. Thank you.
Just for the record, we did receive an email from Mr. Cole at the time, who was raising Reading's concerns, and that was shared with the committee. But again, it has been 4 years, so I can
Thank you.
forgive
Thank you
everyone.
for correcting me.
Mr. Papasturgeon, I see your hand up.
Yes, thank you. Number one, I'd like an answer to John Deamis's question. But to expound on that, of the $25 million that's been assessed in entrance fees, how much of the 25 million is still outstanding?
I don't have those figures at my fingertips, but my team and I can get that back for the executive committee and representatives.
And particularly in Reading's case, I'd like to know how much of the $11 million is outstanding.
Yeah, we can take a look into that. We don't have those numbers in front of us right now.
We could comment on Reading if you'd like. Sorry, we're trying to raise our hand, but we can comment on Reading. if
Yep,
you'd
no,
like.
now we can see it now. Thank you.
Okay,
Okay, so Sharon, our CFO, has some information on that.
so back in 2007, when we did our buy-in, we took out debt to pay. So there isn't anything on your books that you're charging us for the buy-in, but that debt has been affecting our water rates ever since. Like, our residents complain on a regular that we're the highest, one of the highest in the state. And it's because we're carrying 11 million, we carried all these years, $11 million of debt that we're paying interest on all these years, on top of any infrastructure work or anything else that we're doing. And so we're just trying to level the playing field to some extent, because I feel like we are, if you look at our water rates, greatly higher than other communities. And because we were charged such a large and absorbent entrance fee, that's what's driving some of it.
I'm sorry, and Mr. Demus, I must have missed the specifics of your question then, since Mr. Papasturgeon.
Well, I was under the impression that Reading was amortizing their entrance fee.
I
Like-
must have been incorrect in that one. There are, I believe Stoughton certainly did.
Okay, so
Reading
paid a lump sum.
It sounds like they did. Like I said, again, that predated much of, my time here,
was
these
pretty-
discussions, so,
What?
So Matt, as a follow-up then,
Yep.
so what I'd like to know is of the $25 million in entrance fees that have been paid prior to 2002, has anyone asked the MWRA to weigh in on what the effect of waiving all 25 million would be?
that was part of the discussion we had in the entrance fee, discussion and debate before. So it was, obviously, it would change all the economics of it. I don't know that we would have ever done an entrance fee waiver if we had to repay all those funds. And as we had seen from many communities, I think as you know, Andy, Joe and Fred Lasky went down to many different communities to try to get them to join, and the entrance fee was listed many times as a significant barrier to their joining, and that was the reason why, again, Joe for years was the biggest proponent of the entrance fee. Then, everything changes, and I came back, and all of a sudden he decided, we should kick the tires on this. And so that's why we looked at these numbers, and what the MWRA determined was, again, not repaying the 25 million, because that would change all the numbers, and not make it worthwhile. But MWRA's bond council's evaluation of it was, okay, in the past, you're right, it didn't make sense to not recoup the costs of the sunk costs that you mentioned, Mr. Raish, for new communities coming to join the system. But now we're looking at this years later, and we're saying you're actually harming your current ratepayers by trying to charge this entrance fee if you can't even sell the water. It's better in your more financial interest to waive the entrance fee and lower all your existing communities' pieces of the pie whenever you sell more water, and new water that you've got as an excess money that we're having trouble selling. So that was kind of where the genesis of the conversation and where the numbers went on that. And we could certainly, I don't recall that MWRA ran the numbers on what would happen if we paid back the 25 million. I believe that's why they reached out to the outside counsel, just to first determine. We could certainly ask them to do so.
So were you here when, I forgot his name, the green sheet? Who did the green, what was his name?
Which one? You talking about Travis?
Travis.
Yeah.
He did a green sheet. These are little
The
videos
videos, yeah.
on the entrance fee.
Yeah, that's the one I mentioned before, absolutely.
And that was very, very convincing as to why we could never change that policy, and it was absolutely the best thing to do. I just mention that because things change over time. So.
Mr. Pepsterson, your hand is still up. Is that from before, or do you have a new question, comment?
No, I'm going to reserve any further comment on this because I assume that whatever action that the advisory board takes then will be pushed along to the board of directors at MWRA. So I'm going to reserve any further comment. I just want to listen and hear both sides of the argument here. But in terms of where I'm coming from, I mean, we've already waived 104 million in future costs. We had 25 million in past costs. I want to make sure that all the implications of whatever you decide to do with that are fully known.
We do have a couple other hands up. Chris Hanley. Or Haley, sorry.
Hello, thank you. Yes, it's Chris Haley. I'm on the select board in Reading as well. I understand that, $11 million would be a tough pill to swallow in this entire thing, which is, I'm not weakening our argument of we paid the 11 million, and like Burlington, for example, didn't have to pay anything, I believe, in a couple of years back, and 15 million from them got waived. So I understand budgets and how you just justified all that. I mean, I can understand. I think the big thing for me is that looking at the average, when we bought in back in the day, we bought in at an average of 765 million gallons was our buy-in. And our first 10-year average was only 608 million gallons. So we ended up overpaying by $2,248,000. At a minimum, I would like to see that on the table being returned to the town, because that would have a significant impact on our water rates. Like was mentioned, that ours are the, second, third highest in the entire state. And we're over here seeing, I think, Brookline with $3 water rates, which is like absurd. I'd love to have $3. Ours is $12.97 on the highest. So I think during your deliberations, whatever you choose, just at a minimum, I would like to see the 2.248 that we clearly overpaid for in that aspect turn back to the town. That I could see working into budgets easily, but obviously you guys know more than I do on that. So I appreciate your time in letting everybody actually voice their opinions on this. I appreciate it.
We did have one more hand up in the Zoom, Melissa Murphy. You're able to unmute.
Sorry about that. I was trying to unmute. I just have one quick clarifying question. Oh, I'm sorry, Melissa Murphy. I'm a select board member here in Reading as well. Just one quick clarifying question is that I want to make sure I understood a comment earlier. So since the early 2000s, there were 25 million in entrance fees paid by various communities across Massachusetts, and somehow Reading is paying almost 11 million of that. Is that correct?
We have not, I don't have those numbers in front of me, so I can't, be 100% certain of, exactly how many communities are the numbers related to each of them.
Yeah.
But my understanding is that we don't have, we haven't had many communities that have come in over time. Stoughton was one for sure. Reading obviously was one. Gosh, Andy, you'd probably
I
remember.
thought
as well, 'cause
Wilmington came in too.
There we go.
I
yeah,
think-
Wilmington.
I think
Yeah, but they paid a lot less.
I think we can make this really simple. If the number is 25 million collected in entrance fees and Reading has paid 11 million of that out of all the communities in Reading, that should give this board the answer of what they should do and the fairness in that. Because our residents are taking a hard hit because of this. So I really would appreciate this board considering that, because I believe there's 60-ish communities in Massachusetts that are involved in MWRA, and for Reading to be paying that significant amount of money and no other community is, that's just not right.
Wrong. There are 6 communities.
We have the numbers.
There are 6 communities.
It's at the end of Paul's letter.
Yeah.
Attached to.
He attached a,
The second highest community, to your point, was Stoughton at 5.6 million.
we paid double that.
Yeah, it's usury.
Well, there are a number of factors that go into the calculation of this. I've not been on the executive committee forever, but I have been prior to this a consultant in this area for what feels like forever, and represented some of the communities that have been discussed here. So there's always a lot of math that goes into what any one community's is. So I don't think we should consider the magnitude of any one community's in the vacuum, unless we also see the calculations behind what that was. We do have Paul who wrote the letter here.
Comments?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. First of all, on Chris's point, which I agree with on the 2.8 million overpay. As hopefully this board knows, when you enter into water continuation agreements with the local towns, whether an entrance fee is involved, you make a commitment or there is an agreement that you're gonna buy this much water. And that number, based using the calculation that you were talking about, generates the entrance fee. Your continuation agreements also include the clause that says, if you use more water than what you committed to, you will owe an additional entrance fee. Well, in Reading's case, we used a lot less water than what was in our continuation agreement, which was Chris's point. I looked at it, I think one of the reasons why we used less water is as part of our agreements with MWRA and the Interbasin Transfer Act, was part of that agreement, I believe, was that we had to maintain an on and off watering restriction. So we couldn't, this board, this authority prohibited us, or not prohibited, frustrated, I guess, our efforts to get to the commitment that we made, or the agreement that we made with the MWRA to use 766.5 million gallons. And as Chris said, the 10-year average from when we came in was 608 million. So that's my first point. The other point I want to make is the one that you mentioned on bond counsel. Bond counsel, when you ask them if you could, first of all, the decision to waive the entrance fees in 2022 was an absolute fabulous decision. I don't know anybody could vote against that based on the math. And I know you went to the bond council and they came back and said, yes, you have the authority to do that as long as what you do is not arbitrary or capricious. I went back and looked at the three fundamental arguments that existed in 2022 that were mentioned here was that there was excess water capacity. It was extremely profitable to sell it. And I'll go over that number in a minute. And towns were experiencing increasing levels of contaminants in the water. So those were the three reasons. 2008, when we came in, those same three items existed. There was excess water. The water used by the total water use in 2008 was 205 million gallons. In 2022, when you made the decision, it was 211 million gallons. It was actually more in 2022 than it was in 2008. So that pretty much the same circumstance. The other circumstance was profitability. The arguments that were made in 2022 were that, you know, if we want to get as many communities in to the extent that we can afford the increase in use of water, because we charge them $5,000 per million, $5,000 per million gallons. And it's costing us, and the financial people came up with $185, which they then reduced to $178 due to electrical regeneration costs. So it's huge, it's 96% profit. I'm sure those same types of numbers existed in 2008 as they did in existing in 2022. The last issue on contaminants in the water, clearly that was an issue in 2022. It was an issue in 2008. We had a gas truck overturned on 93 that contaminated most of our wells in Reading in the early 90s. We had to shut them all down. Another further accident like that would basically wipe us out. So those three components that drove the decision in 2022 existed in 2008, and I don't know how we can sit here and say the 2022 argument is not arbitrary and capricious when a decision was concluded that was completely opposite of the decision that took place in 2008 on the identical set of circumstances.
Michael Smith.
Thank you. I appreciate it. I just wanted to say, just speak briefly on behalf of Representative Jones, just to reiterate and support what Mr. Silva has been talking about, and also all the running officials that have spoken previously. You know, you, as the town manager had pointed out, you had said that the board's not necessarily under a legal obligation to refund any of this money, but hopefully, as he mentioned, you know, as a matter of fairness, you'll take a look at that and see if there might be a way to come to an agreement to refund this money, or at least a portion of this, as you know, Selectman Haley had mentioned, you know, the 2.2 million, I believe, that he said works out as the difference between what they was anticipating for water usage versus the average water usage for the town. But again, we appreciate you providing this opportunity. Representative Jones was hoping he could be here himself to testify and offer his remarks, but we do appreciate your consideration, and, you know, hope that you'll take a serious look at this and address some of the concerns that have been raised by the town of Reading.
Thank you.
One last point, if I may.
Sure.
What I guess I want to make here is the decision that was made in 2022, like, it was a perfectly wonderful decision. It was absolutely the right decision to make. Where those same set of circumstances existed in 2008, the entrance fees basically should have been eliminated in 2008. If that was done, and you were successful in getting in your new communities and selling them 7,300 million gallons of water per year, the MWRA would have recorded net incremental revenue of roughly 2/3 of $1 billion. Because they would have made $35 million on that water for 18 years. And so that was it should have been done back then. I think we're just continuing that I'm glad we made the right decision in 2022. But I'm gonna reiterate what everybody else has said. It's really totally unfair what's been done to Reading compared to what's been done with all the other towns. It's an issue of fairness, but I think we can talk about arbitrary and capriciousness. And I think we can talk about the clause that your lawyers are relying on the entrance fees on the historical investment. It talks about reasonable provisions. I don't know that that's a reasonable provision that the MWRA took to come up with those entrance fees. So that's basically all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions or comments from executive committee members? John?
What is the process here? I mean, is Reading coming to this board first? Has it gone to the MWRA directly? What are you looking for us to do?
Right, Mr. Silva's letter was addressed to Mr. Lasky. Mr. Lasky and his team have been looking at it on their end. They did ask it to come to us for discussion because it is an intra-community issue. And again, as with all things community related, they do try to involve us or defer to us to at least address it first or discuss it. And then that way they can, feel like they respond within the context of what we as a, executive committee and then ultimately an advisory board feel. Same way that we did with the entrance fee when we did waive it, took a long time, got the vote,
Well,
send it over to the MWRA, and the MWRA is the one who ultimately makes the choice. If the MWRA board had disagreed with our request to waive the entrance fee, they could very well have not done it. Ultimately, we are not the decision makers, but they do give us a lot of latitude and involvement with anything that's related to our communities.
the entrance fee has been a contentious issue over the years. And when I first joined this board, the subject came up and a couple people said we should get rid of the entrance fee. And they were slapped pretty hard, by the other members of the board. You can't do that, our past and blah, 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 all the reasons for having the entrance fee came out. And so that bubbles down for a while, then it comes back up again. And the most recent time it came up, it was, well, gee, maybe the entrance fee doesn't make sense anymore. And the composition of the board changed and the environment changed and a different decision was made. Which I fully supported, by the way. So the question to me is, okay, what do we owe people and why do we owe them? I mean, if somebody entered into a decision with their eyes wide open in 2007, and it was a arm's length transaction, everybody was acting responsibly, then that's the deal, right? And the question is, what obligations do we have then? We've changed the policy, and I guess we got to talk about that a little bit.
I do see Mr. Manoogian's hand up.
Yeah, Rich, to follow up on John's, are we gonna sort of talk amongst ourselves next or separately, or is it just an open conversation for the whole thing? I'm trying to decide when to follow up with comments.
Yeah, I think it's fine for executive committee members to deliberate on this. So Mr. Manoogian, if you've got questions, comments, please feel free to express them now.
Yeah, so I think Reading's bringing this up is a very fair opportunity for them to bring it up, and I don't have an issue bringing it to the advisory board as a whole. That being said, being in Bedford, which was a community that entered after the initial communities, we pay the $5,000+ per million gallons. Our highest water rate is $14.30. And for us, it's a very good deal compared to our alternatives. And I would add that I think just doing a quick calculation of what Reading is paying as a comparison of their per household income for water, it's only around 1%, which is lower than the Water Infrastructure Finance Commission's 1.25%. So I think it is high, being on the end of the system. Bedford is sympathetic to that. But it's certainly within the range of community that's looking for MWRA water. Thank you.
Any other executive committee members want to share thoughts? Mike Radmacher?
Sure, thank you. I guess I also have a question. So Arlington's rates are high too, right? There's a whole host of reasons why that is. One is the cost of the water from the MWRA being the quality it is, and the cost to provide that. What I would like to have a little more information on this a dollar amount that is believed to be unfair to Reading because of the amount sold. There's a claim that was calculated incorrectly. Was there any additional information presented on that? I did not see that in the letter. Or if I did, I didn't catch it.
Again, my understanding of it is when communities come in, they have to go through the Interbasin Transfer Act process. They have to go through a lot of environmental regulatory hurdles to show that they've done what they need to do. They can't use the local sources. They've kicked all the tires on other options before they then are allowed to proceed with the request from the advisory board and from the MWRA to enter the system. In order to participate in that process, a number has to be provided so they can see what is the impact going to be. Again, it's the Interbasin Transfer Act is a little moot for MWRA in the sense that we have so much water in the Quabbin, but it's really got it exists really to make sure that next door interbasin transfers don't cause environmental problems or supply issues for those communities. So from a supply standpoint on MWRA, it doesn't really, it's not that big a deal for us, but you still have to go through the process. And because you do, DEP and all of the various stakeholders along the way, and that's what the MWRA checks, as MWRA is very quick to say, we're like the easy part of the process. Like we're not the ones who really do much of anything related to checking out how you are calculating your numbers and how you are, did you look at all this stuff locally? That's all a lot of other agencies. And then when it gets through that process, it then comes to the MWRA. So the number that is approved tends to be the number that was calculated by the community. It's also one of those situations where, again, they want to try to calculate it at a up to level, right? You don't want to have to keep coming back every single time that you are, hitting your, the next year, and all of a sudden saying, oh shoot, we were way off. We need an extra, 2 MGD or whatever. So the numbers are calculated, again, obviously in coordination with the MWRA, just so the MWRA answers whether or not we have water to sell, what would be the capacity we have, what infrastructure might we need for new communities or the new communities would need to connect to us. But the number is usually included as part of the process.
And Reading was a good soldier and not coming back and putting in that initial continuation, the initial agreement, 766.5 million gallons. And we probably counseled to go high, so we wouldn't have to come back. And now we got punished because we used substantially less water than what was in that agreement. When the MWRA is protecting itself on the other end, that should you use more, we're gonna go back and charge you that extra entrance fee. We're punished for being good soldiers. And I don't know how anyone can view that any differently. And the last point I want to make, I'm a little critical here. I'm certainly a lot critical of expense fees, and I think entrance fees, and I think it's probably the black mark on MWRA. But since I started working on water issues in Reading back in August, I have to tell you, I've developed a fantastic appreciation for the MWRA and what it has accomplished over the last 30 years. Just in the reduction of the 350 million gallons per day that were being used, I think back in the early 1990s, to around 210 million now, without putting in any type of draconian conservation measures, just doing smart things like fixing leaks and efficient appliances of toilets and shower heads and things like that. So Mass residents have one of the best water systems, as far as I'm concerned, from what I've learned in the last 6 months than any place else in the country, and our quality is fantastic. So I don't want this board to leave with an opinion that I have a poor opinion of the MWRA. My issue is solely on expense fees, and everything else that you're doing regarding transparency, how you do it, how you goal oriented, is something that I, as a taxpayer and a resident and a ratepayer in Massachusetts, is appreciative of.
This would be the choir to whom you're preaching.
Rich, comment, Rich. I am not a fan of trying to rewrite history. I think that opens the door to lots of potentially unintended consequences. I am interested in Mr. Haley's point, though, in terms of if in fact the original fee was based on a particular number that for whatever reason MWRA created difficulty in reaching. Seems to me there's potential for some relief on that dimension. So that's sort of where I come down on the at least current discussion.
Yeah, for myself, I'm not interested. In no way, shape, or form do I want to reopen the particulars of the 2022 decision and the waiver moving forward. Because we've got so many other things in motion around system expansion that is predicated on that. I'd rather view this as a separate item. The evaluation of refunding, historic ones. For myself, I'm hesitant to make a recommendation and go forward to the advisory board writ large with Reading in isolation. Like I would want to see the math on as Mr. Cyrus points out, the particulars of the calculation on their entrance fee, what is on the table in terms of what we might want to consider in terms of relief. But also we'll see where Burlington is and where the other communities either who had amortized it or had bond funded it and are still working off the bond. So it might have already been 100% received by MWRA in terms of the cash flow, but they're still retiring their debt. At least from, that's the way I look at this. I personally am not comfortable with just moving forward on Reading by itself, even with additional investigation on the particulars of the calculation. I think we have to look at what our total liability is, in fairness to the other communities who are still paying it. That's sort of my view on that.
I would have a tough time giving money back to Reading and not addressing the other communities. Well, and what are we gonna do? Try to keep it secret somehow so the communities don't find out about it, I mean.
There's very little that can be kept secret these days.
Correct. That's it would never be
like a secret, one of those secret warranties, you fix it, but you don't tell anybody else who has the problem.
It looks like Jay's got his hand up.
Yeah, Jay Hersey, town of Brookline. It still feels like we need more information in order to deliberate on this. Like, have we had MWRA's counsel or legal team weigh in on the agreements, past and present, and have a determination of what we can legally do or not legally do? That information would be helpful for us to have a further discussion. Thanks.
Right. I actually did speak with MWRA General Counsel this morning, who said that they have been looking into the issue. Again, I think this is what they wanted to know was what were some of the arguments in favor, like how to approach it, right? Like the way that you suggested, Mr. Raish, is taking a look at it not in isolation, but as a whole. So it sounds like now that we have the information to go back to the MWRA, similar to the way we did during the entrance fee debate. We didn't generate most of the information because we're not the ones who calculate entrance fees. We're not the ones who, determine what we can actually safe yield take out of the Quabbin. We rely on the MWRA to give us, and their expertise to give us those pieces of information. And now it sounds like we've got a good background of questions that wish to be, that you wish us to bring back to them. And we can certainly follow up once we have that information for everyone before we have any other,
So are we gonna rely on the information in the excellent letter, by the way? In the letter, are we gonna go back and just kind of like double check and make sure that we agree with everything in the letter?
Oh,
And especially what alarmed me is, I'm pretty sure Wilmington joined. You know,
oh,
and it's not in here.
well, we,
So-
yeah, we, exactly, we would
So we
want
need
to.
all the facts
Right.
and maybe we have, or
Absolutely.
maybe we don't, but I mean, I think I need. Either the staff here or the MWRA staff to go back and really frame the argument that we're talking about with all the dollars that may be at risk here.
And
Absolutely.
maybe MWA finance team to come up with options, couple of options in terms of how one might move forward.
I worked on Wilmington's interface and transfer.
It's just
So I
gonna
know how
say, I had a
painful it was.
feeling when you got that look in your face.
All right, so it wasn't a faulty memory on my
No,
part, okay.
Wilmington definitely joined.
Just one last point, and I hope none of you are lawyers. The comment that was made about going back to the lawyers. Lawyers, I'm a CPA and I've worked with lawyers my whole life. They tell you what you can and cannot do. They do not tell you what you should or shouldn't do. Listening to the lawyers that said you can apply an entrance fee back in 2008 to get $25 million in entrance fees, cost the authority $600 million over since then. So we should have not listened to the lawyers in 2000.
It was a different world. One of the issues from 30 years ago. when the
Mere anarchy is on loose here. We've
When the
got,
MWRA was established, was that there was no extra water capacity.
So that was in
when we-
1984,
Yeah.
it was in
I
2008.
want to be sensitive, gentlemen,
I don't,
to the
let's
fact,
not,
yeah.
I don't
we've
wanna
got-
get into the ancient history.
We already had a very full agenda ahead of us, so I think there's some clear consensus or at least a direction from the executive committee that we want MWRA staff to provide us with some backup on Readings in particular, but also some of the other more recent entrance fees. So we could see the math and the particulars around that. So if the advisory board staff can work with MWRA staff to get some of that math and history for us, we can put this on a future agenda.
Absolutely.
I don't think we need any formal vote on that. I think it's just direction.
Yeah, no, I don't think so at this point. We
Yeah.
heard very clearly what some of the requests were, and we know where to go. We will get those to you as soon as we get them from the MWRA.
Great.
And then, leave it up to you all to decide, just like the entrance fee debate. Do we need more information? Does that raise more questions? At which point, once you feel like you've got the information you need, then you can, you as an executive committee can determine when you want to have the next actual full at a meeting.
So thank you to Mr. Silva again. I agree with Mr. Diamis's excellent letter. Thanks for bringing this to our attention. Thanks to everyone sitting in the conference room in Reading and
Thank you for your time,
Thank you so much.
for putting
Thank
us
you
on.
for your
here.
time.
We
We
appreciate,
look forward to further conversations.
appreciate you moving us up too. So
Thank
thank
you.
you.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Take care now.
should have put you at the end. We'd be all exhausted from the back.
Yeah.
No, thank you.
Thank you again.
Take care.
All right, take care.
All right, I think that brings us back to our normal order of events and the executive director's report.